No Casagers other. Gilliam Casagers.
Okay. All right, we'll wait for him. All right. We'll call a special commission meeting to order. Today is the 24th today at 5:30. All commissioners, well done all. 4 of the commissioners are here. Cynthia Peach, you're not on, are you?
I don't think so.
Okay, can you call and see if she wants to chime in? The Zoom link, I think, is on the website.
I sent it to her too. Yeah,
Okay,
I can do that.
all right.
Voicemail.
Okay. Roll. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ford at this time.
Yes. It's Ms. Peach, Mr. Chair.
Oh.
An answer?
Yeah.
Hi. Yes, are you able to join us? Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Bye. So she's hopping on.
Is she?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want me to still proceed?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right, so thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Fair Board. Sorry about the accommodations, the veteran groups are using the big room tonight, so. But I'll just run through a couple of updates, update the Commission and the Fair Board, where we've come from, where we're at. Highlight some of the proposals, and then Ms. Wamsted's gonna get into the legalese. So, so to date, county officials, Fair Board officials, River City Speedway ownership have had some meetings discussing some concerns about the potential impacts that the new juvenile detention center or the youth assessment center will have on their operations. Construction engineers, they've been doing some surveying work, but no ground is broken. And we don't want them to do that till we come to an agreement with the Fair Board. We've had some good discussions back and forth discussing different options to mitigate the concerns that have been expressed. Some of the biggest impacts or concerns that I've heard is interruption, obviously, of the race operations, losing space, interruption of the county fair, and parking for spectators of the races and the fair goers. So Ms. Wamstead and I, we've worked together to try to put together some documents in writing that both the Fair Board and the County Commission can agree to. Couple highlights before I give way to Ms. Wamstead. Talking with construction engineers, talking with icons, the River City Speedway would not lose access to their pit roads north and south. And Haley, can you go to the other one that had some of my chicken scratch on it? So they won't lose access to either pit road. The construction's not going to impede or interrupt the county fair or speedway events, so they're going to work around your events. The North Pit Road, let's see how well this works. Not very well. The North Pit Road, when the project's done, will be paved, and the Fair Board and River City Speedway will, of course, be able to use that road. The old pit road, I believe it's called, the south access on Highway 81, that's going to be built up. It's going to have recycled concrete as a base, and there's going to be a gravel base, and so it will be better, much more usable, for lack of a better phrase. Also, I believe Mr. West is looking at some options. There could be some overflow parking in the county highway yard while the project is ongoing, making that available, and some other things that I think I'm missing. Oh, parking lot. So I know when the project is done, we're going to widen the parking lot area to the south of what would be the youth assessment center. And then speedway spectators could use that parking lot on race nights. Fair goers could use that parking lot during the county fair. We'll definitely make it mutually beneficial. And I think those are some of the ways we're going to try to mitigate the concerns that we've been hearing from the Fair Board and River City Speedway. I think, Mr. Chair, with that, I'll just give way to Ms. Wamstead as she would like to run through the document.
So, hello, members of the commission, members of the Fair Board. My name is Haley Wamstead. I think I've visited with many of you already, but for those of you who might not know me, I'm the state's attorney for Grand Forks County. My involvement here is that my understanding is Mr. Ford and some commissioners have had some discussions and ideas on how we can work together, and my role has been to kind of put the plans in writing so that we can have a discussion about what the county's proposal is, and you can see it in writing and have an opportunity to provide your input or discussion on the topic as well. And so I guess I've handed out, I think, to most of you who would like a copy of the proposed land use agreement as well as the attached exhibits. I have a couple extra copies, so if there are others that would like a copy, just let me know and I can certainly share a copy. Also, I have up on the screen so that we can all kind of look at the same exhibits. I'll reference different exhibits when we're going through the land use agreement so that it's clear as to what we're all talking about. One thing I would note is that Exhibit C is different than what I had previously emailed to you. The difference is very slight. but the surveyor that completed this had just a small typographical error in the bottom right-hand corner, where it now on the screen and in what I handed out today references Grand Forks County, North Dakota. It previously referenced Polk County, Minnesota. So it's just been replaced essentially with that correction and a certified copy essentially, but the drawing hasn't changed in any way, nor has the legal description changed in any way on Exhibit C. So a few things before I get into the meat and potatoes of the agreement that I drafted. There's a few things that either from direction from commissioners or just ideas of my own that I wanted to be sure to incorporate into this agreement. Was prior to preparing this agreement, I reviewed the prior leases that have been entered into between the Fair Board and the county to make sure what we agreed to today is kind of consistent with what has previously been provisions of the lease, so that we're not greatly departing from the provisions of the prior agreements. As we all know, the prior agreements were kind of piecemeal. There was different agreements for different parcels, and it made for kind of a bit of a complicated mess to know what's what and when what has expired. And I think there were some good intentions behind that. One of the prior agreements references the county's potential future expansion of the correctional center. So those lots that were closer to that facility were shorter term leases than some of the lots that were farther away. But in my discussion with some of the commissioners, I think there was an interest in putting it all into one document and kind of getting a more cohesive plan for the whole. So it isn't this parcel is this period of time and that parcel is that period of time. So when I was drafting that, that was another thing that I wanted to be sure to incorporate. Another thing, you'll notice, obviously, there's several exhibits here. The prior agreements weren't always the most clear as to what parcel is referenced. So for example, I think one of the prior agreements indicated the westerly portion of Lot 7. What exactly is the westerly portion, or how much of the westerly portion, wasn't very clear. And so I thought it would be important to have legal descriptions drafted for each specific parcel, so there isn't any confusion. Your interpretation of the westerly portion may be different than my interpretation. And so I think it's beneficial for all of us to be on the same page by having those legal descriptions incorporated into the agreement so that it's clear as to what parcels we're referencing. And then obviously there was an interest in having all of the provisions and promises between the two entities in one agreement, so that there's one spot where we can look to and reference what our agreement was. So first, what I'll do is I'll kind of outline the properties. I know everybody's very familiar with the properties that exist, but I also think it's important that, you know, if anyone isn't, that we're all on the same page before we delve into the details of the agreement. So what I have up on the big screen here is this is Exhibit A that's included in your packet. And this is the replat that has been filed with the county recorder for the Fairgrounds subdivision. This replat was completed, I believe, in 2005, and it's the most recent one on record with the county recorder. So just to get everyone to their bearings, if you can see my mouse on the screen, I'll try to kind of highlight certain provisions. So where my mouse is following here, this is Gateway Drive, right at the bottom of the map. Over here on the right of the screen, this is North Washington Street. Right here where my mouse is circling, that's where the current correctional center is. Over here, what's designated as Lot 1, that is where the highway department is, the grandstand, the exhibits building, the go-kart track, just so we're all kind of on the same page. Right now, this entire parcel, all this land that's subject to this replat is county-owned land. Obviously, many of those parcels are subject to leases with the Fair Board. Some of those leases have expired. Some of those leases are still in place. So like I said, this is the highway department's land. That's not under a lease agreement right now. This is where the correctional center is. It's not under lease. This portion up here, this rectangle that comes to the west of lot 7. Lot 7 is this oblong shape that goes all the way down through the go-kart track up north and then juts out into this rectangle right here. This portion of lot 7 is an expired lease right now. I believe the initial lease was in 2005. It was extended for a period of time and that extension has again expired. So that's one thing that we want to get worked out so that we've got that lease or that land available for your entity to use moving forward.
Could I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Why did it expire then without us knowing? That we're not,
Well, it was a
Or
provision of
use.
the prior lease that was signed. I believe the last extension was a 5-year extension. I'd have to look at my notes again. I think that extension might have been in 2010,
No,
And it's-
16,
16, maybe.
signed in February of 16.
That could be, yep.
Hmm.
So, you know, you guys have a copy of the agreement,
we've
just
been
like-
holding it for free.
but then also on the flip side, using it for free.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Well, the public has.
Yep.
We're just representing the public.
Yep. So, and that's something that is addressed in the agreement that I'll cover once we get into those details. But first, I also wanted to share with you what's also in your packet is Exhibit B, which I have up on the screen here. So this is the Valley Co-edition replat, which I think dates back to 1966, if I recall correctly. And that's the most recent replat that was completed for this parcel of property. Lot 1, which I'll highlight with my mouse, if you can see on the big screen, that's the Valley Ho Trailer Park. And then Lot 2, which is this somewhat triangular shape to the right-hand side of this plat is, that's the land that's owned currently by the Fair Board. You'll see in this plat, a lot of different lines heading many different directions. Those are easements that are currently in place on that parcel of land that exists. So that's just to kind of explain kind of where we are and what properties are subject to this lease. So I guess first I'll begin by just, if you want to look at the agreement that you have in front of you, the first page just lists the recitals. Basically, this is just what has got us to this point. It explains this parcel of land is owned by the county. This parcel of land is owned by the Fair Board, just as I explained to you. It explains that you have an interest in renewing the lease that's expired with the Fair Board, and so that's something we want to address here. The county also has an interest in moving forward with the expansion with the Correctional Juvenile Detention Center, and so that's outlined in the recitals. So this is just kind of setting the stage for where we're at today. And if you look on page 2, section 1, this is the lease agreement for the parcels of land that the county proposes to lease to the Fair Board. One thing I would like to say before we delve into this is that some of these parcels are currently under lease, but the interest is to have everything in one document so that we have one document to reference back to. So essentially, this document would void our prior leases, wrap them all up into one so that we've got one document encapsulating our whole agreement between the two entities. So in paragraph 1, it states the county agrees to lease lot 2, which I'll point out with my mouse. I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see. Lot 2 is right at the bottom of the screen. Lot 3, which is up here. Lot 4, again towards the bottom. lot 5, which is the parcel where the exhibits building is located, and lot 6, which is the lot just south of the exhibits building. So all of those parcels, the county would propose to lease to the Fair Board for a period of 10 years in the amount of $1. And if we look at paragraph 2, this is where it's a little more complicated and why it's addressed in a separate paragraph. So when we look at lot 7, this is this really strange shape that I discussed earlier, where the middle of this lot is where the county correctional center is right now. But then it's got this rectangle that butts out at the bottom, which is what's commonly known as the race car track, or the go-kart track, excuse me. And then we've got this rectangular portion that butts out to the west. As we stated earlier, this lease has expired for the northwest portion. The go-kart track down here is addressed in paragraph 2 of section 1, where the county agrees to lease the southern portion of lot 7, commonly referred to as the go-kart track, for also a period of 10 years. So that's consistent with these other parcels, same period of time. Then that paragraph also provides a legal description for the race car track. So it's clear exactly what area we're talking about here. So there's no confusion. And just for clarity's sake, if we move ahead to exhibit C, that's also identified as area B. And the legal description is right on this same page of exhibit C that the surveyor has drafted for specifically the go-kart track. So that's clear that that's a 10-year lease along with those other parcels that are referenced in paragraph 2. And in relation to this provision of the lease, paragraph 3, consistent with the prior leases that have been entered into, Fair Board's responsible for maintaining the property, developing buildings if you wish, etc. Paragraph 4, Fair Board has the authority to sublease these parcels. So again, going back to this one, sublease to the speedway or anything like that, that's still within your discretion, consistent with those prior leases that are in place. Paragraph 5, county reserves the right to terminate by giving the Fair Board prior notice. That's outlined in paragraph 5. Paragraph 6 provides that essentially if the Fair Board ceases to use this property as for purposes of a fair for a period of 2 years absent good cause, the property would revert back to the county. Same provision that's been in prior leases that have been in place. Essentially, that's the purpose. The prior one was 5 years.
We did have a fair for 5 years.
I can double check that. I thought it was 2, but I can double check that. And if we move on, paragraph 7, similar provision as any lease agreement, the landowner owns the fixed property on the land, personal property belongs to the lessee. Paragraph 8, Fair Board would be required to carry liability insurance as a condition of the lease of the land, consistent with the lease agreement. If we move on to section 2, section 2 is pertaining to this northwesterly portion of lot 7 that I'm pointing out right here on the map that we previously discussed. This I chose to treat as a license agreement rather than a lease agreement, and let me explain why. If we look at exhibit C, if we look at exhibit E, excuse me. This is the parcel that Mr. Ford was talking about, where the county would offer to pave a roadway and parking lot to that area. My understanding is the Fair Board currently uses that as a parking area, but it's not currently paved. So the county's proposal, which is incorporated later into this agreement, which we'll get to, is to pave that roadway. I'll just run with my mouse here so you can see from North Washington Street here, running down here to access this parking lot. That would be essentially between the Fair Board property and the expanded correctional center. So the reason this is, I thought it would be most appropriate to treat it as a license agreement rather than a lease agreement is that my understanding is the intent is that this would be jointly used by both parties. So when fair activities are going on, it can be used as a fair use parking lot. When there's parking needs at the correctional facility, then it would be used by the county employees or visitors or whatever it may be. So because it's a jointly used property, I felt like a lease agreement was the legal mechanism that would be the best way to lay that out. Paragraph 2 essentially provides that it's a license to use the parking and driveway for that purpose. You can't obstruct vehicular traffic or drive onto the grass and make ruts in the grass, or it would be for the use of a parking and driveway. Paragraph 3 essentially explains that because this is a jointly used property, we'd be jointly responsible for maintenance and cleaning of this property in proportion to each entity's use. Paragraph 4, a requirement of lease agreements, or excuse me, of license agreements by law is that the owner of the property must retain absolute control. So that's why that provision is in there. Paragraph 5, also a legal requirement of license agreements is that there has to be a provision where the landowner can terminate the agreement if it's not used for the purposes it was intended. And then paragraph 6 is just a standard paragraph. Obviously, if something occurs on that property, the county's not liable just because the county is the landowner of it. You know, so if somebody's car gets stolen or something like that, the county naturally wouldn't be responsible just because they own the land underneath that property. So if we move on to section 3, section 3 pertains to this parcel of land that we previously discussed is currently the Fair Board land, lot 2 of the Valley Cole Edition replat. Paragraph 1 outlines that the Fair Board is the owner of that property. Paragraph 2 provides that the Fair Board would grant to the county a temporary, non-exclusive easement for purposes of construction. So it's my understanding in visiting with ICON and construction engineers that they would hope if the Fair Board was agreeable to utilize this property for staging, for storage of materials or whatever they need for the period of construction. So if you look at paragraph 3 relating to this section, it provides that this construction easement is temporary and will terminate upon completion of the Grand Forks Correctional Center and Juvenile Assessment Center expansion and construction project. One thing I would note is that my understanding in visiting with the relevant parties, commissioners, ICON, and construction engineers, is they don't intend to interfere with the Fair Board activities. So I understand this property is used for parking and different things like that during Fair Board activities. So we've memorialized that into the agreement as well. So you have some assurances that they won't interfere which is later in the agreement, and I'll get to that eventually. But I just thought it was relevant to this section. So then section 4 on page 5 is a permanent easement, also relevant to the same parcel of property. It's just kind of a preliminary information. This is in the granting of a permanent easement is in the interest of both parties. And the reason is in my conversations with both ICON and construction engineers is that there's a roadway that crosses across this property to get to the lot 7 parking lot that would then be jointly used by both the Fair Board and the county to access that parking lot just north of the correctional center. In addition, there are utilities that come across this property to the benefit of both parties. My understanding is that these utilities need to be rerouted in light of the new building's construction, but those utilities serve the grandstand. So naturally, I could presume that the Fair Board would want those utilities to continue after construction. And likewise, I presume the county would do the same. So there's kind of some mutual benefit here. And so I believe I outlined that in paragraph number 2, that both parties have an interest in continuing with these utilities to fulfill both their functions of each entity. So then paragraph 3 is where the utility easement is actually granted for this parcel of property. So it's for purposes of installing, constructing, repairing, replacing, you name it, sanitary sewer, water, storm sewer, and electricity. And if you look at paragraph number 4, this is for the roadway and the parking lot. So this is specifically referenced in Exhibit F. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit on Exhibit F, because I think this map helps to illustrate exactly what we're talking about when we look at these easements. So when we talk about the roadway easement here on Exhibit F, this is this red line that comes right through the Fair Board's property. That roadway currently exists. It's just not a paved roadway. This is, again, an additional promise or covenant that the county is making, addressed later in this agreement, that the county would pave this roadway at the expense of the county. But this agreement outlines the easement so that they're able to do so. Additionally, if you look at where my mouse is right here, this little turquoise or teal triangle, you'll notice this black line is the property line. The new construction includes the addition of this parking lot right here, mostly on county property, but this top corner hangs over onto this parcel of property. And so the easement would allow for this corner to be on that property, as well as the connecting roadway through here that's outlined in the reddish orange color. So that's what the let's see, paragraph 4 under the permanent easement is for, both that roadway and the parking lot. So section 5, to move along, this is the additional covenants, essentially these additional promises that haven't already been addressed in the prior section of this agreement. So some of them we've talked about already. Paragraph 1 in that section is the county's promise to improve, pave, and maintain that roadway mutually beneficial to both parties. So that's this roadway that we're talking about here. So it would come through the Fair Board property, continue to be paved all the way down, connecting with this parking lot on lot 7 that likewise would be paved by the county. This paragraph explains that this would be done at the expense of the county. Paragraph 2 addresses establishing, constructing, repairing, replacing, and maintaining utilities that are subject to those easements that we previously talked about. This paragraph provides that that would be done at the expense of the county. And essentially, that's those utilities we talked about that would be connecting with the grandstand and whatnot. Then when we look at paragraph 3 under this section, this is the paragraph we talked about earlier where the county promises not to interfere or disrupt the regularly scheduled activities of the Fair Board throughout the construction and expansion of the correctional center. It also references that that's for the term of this agreement, which is 10 years. So I think we all hope the construction doesn't last 10 years, but it's just for assurances, it's for the full duration of the agreement. If for some unforeseen situation arises where construction lasts longer than anticipated, I just wanted to make sure that you had that assurance for the full term of the agreement. Paragraph number 4 references Exhibit D. And this is the plat that was most recently drafted by the surveyor to replat both lot 7 that we've outlined before, where the correctional center is located, and also that parcel that's owned by the Fair Board. It would replat them to include some of the easements and things like that we have discussed. So paragraph 4 is just that the parties agreed to this surveyor's replat so that it can be filed with the county recorder. Then if we move on to the next page, what remains here is kind of what us lawyers call boilerplate language, kind of standard language that's included in most legal agreements. Section 6 is indemnification and insurance. Section 7, this contract is governed by the laws of the state of North Dakota, naturally. Section 8, merger and modification. Basically what that paragraph says is this is the entire agreement between the parties. So that essentially we're agreeing, we have memorialized everything in writing here, so that later we can come back and say, you know, the Fair Board promised A, B, and C. No, if it's not in this document in writing, it's not part of the agreement. So if I've forgotten something, it's important that we memorialize it into this agreement so that it not be excluded later. Section 9 on the next page is just standard boilerplate language for if any notices are required. Here are the addresses of where those notices need to be sent. Section 10, the parties' agreement to comply with all laws. Section 11, compliance with public records laws. As we all know, as public entities funded by taxpayer dollars, we're subject to North Dakota open records laws. So that just explains that. Section 12, assignment and subcontractors, basically just allows the Fair Board to, as stated previously in the agreement, to subcontract or sublease to other entities. Here, if you were to assign your interest, you would need written consent of the Board of Commissioners. So if the Fair Board decided to get into the shopping mall business and hand over duties to run a fair to another entity, you naturally would need the county's written consent to assign your rights here. Section 13, notice of potential claims, also standard boilerplate language that essentially if something happens on the property, the county wishes to be notified if we may face any liability for whatever may have happened. Section 14, also kind of boilerplate language. If essentially saying if a court determines that any section of this agreement is illegal or anything like that, that shouldn't affect the binding nature of the rest. Section 15 merely says that if the two boards don't sign it on the same date, that's okay. And the effective date is the most recent. So essentially, whoever signs it last is the effective date of when the agreement comes into play. So, I hope that makes sense. I did the best I could to kind of make it as clear as possible, because I think that's important so that there isn't any issue for confusion in the future. I hope that I included all the promises or agreements or anything like that. With that said, I think this is just a proposal. I don't want to speak on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, but I think this is the proposal going forward, and it's open to discussion. I think I've covered everything, but I'm available for questions. If anyone has any questions about any provision or concerns about how it's been written, or I'm open to any questions anybody has.
Well, I'll just start right out.
Okay, could you identify your name and the
My
fact
name
that
is
you're-
Pam Larback and I'm a Fair Board Director. I do believe this is a good beginning for us. We do have some questions and concerns. I don't know if we want to go through those today or if we plan just to submit our questions in writing, or how does this work?
If they're for me, legal questions, I can certainly do my best to get you answers today, no promises. If it's something that I need to do some legal research, I'm happy to do that and can get you answers at a later date.
Well, like you say, it's a proposal and
Yeah.
certainly agreement with everything. So
So I
how
think,
do we,
yeah, I think the board is kind of been reiterating, right, needs some time to digest and talk and.
We do have some questions.
Yes, go ahead.
If you know of questions right now, as you see this, as you're going through it, fire away. You can
Okay.
throw the answer.
Okay. Then I will start. In the first section, the lease agreement. It says the county agrees to lease, but it doesn't give us a lease. So we propose the county agrees to lease and then add the language and does hereby lease. In 1 and 2.
We could just switch it to the county hereby leases. Does that seem?
Yep.
Make that update.
In section 3, it says we're responsible for everything. I know we had asked, or we had made known to the commission that we would like to incorporate some of the repairs to the grandstand, some of the future recommended repairs to the grandstand be borne by the county.
And we had talked about that.
Yep, but in here, it doesn't say that.
Okay. So what type of a figure are we looking at? I mean, where are we at with repairs to that main grandstand?
Everything that has been needed to be done has been done at this point.
Mr. Chair, in one of the emails I had sent to the Fair Board, I had asked to outline what repairs have been made to date.
Yeah.
What repairs still need to be made and what the estimate of those repairs are needed.
Okay.
We're still waiting on that information, but that was something I know that was discussed in one of our first meetings, and yeah, but I think if we can get an idea, even if you want me to talk to Mr. Clevin, I'm happy to, but I just need an idea of what's remaining and what the figures would be to complete. But I'm happy to reach out to
yeah,
you.
we
if you want me
assume, sorry,
No, go ahead.
Dennis Paz, Direct Fair Board.
Yep.
So I thought we had completed everything right up to that.
We do.
to. Okay, I think the only, has
And
Mr.
did a little more, in fact, because we found some, quite a bit, and had it done the right way.
Has Mr. Clevin sort of like come in, and that's all I would need from him then?
He would know that answer if he has.
Okay.
has not.
Is it okay if I follow up with Mr. Clevin?
Yes, because
Okay.
part of that language, he has said that he suggested to the county that this be inspected every year for $5,000 and
Yeah.
and send the bill to the Fair Board. I talked to a lot of people who says, where does this come from? This inspection needed every year on a building that's been brought up to par.
Well, I think Darren Everbold was at the original meetings with me and Diane Knopf and to be honest with you, if she was here, she would have shut down the grandstand, so,
So, you know,
but she's not, so. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to make sure that you could utilize that main grandstand. So we wanted that engineer to come in every year to see what needed to be done every year to make it viable and safe. So that's where it was left.
and I understand that, and that's great, but then you're the guys that wanted that inspection.
Yeah, but you are the guys that need it.
Well, the public needs it.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
public does.
And that's a huge bill to be sent down to us. But, you know, when the building's up to par, meets inspection code.
My understanding of the inspections was just until the work was completed. So if the works, again, I'll ask Mr. Clement about that. So if the work's completed, it shouldn't need annual inspections. That was just for the period of,
He was doing it annually though, wasn't he?
I think it was just until the project, the recommended repairs. were
We'll
done.
get it cleared up.
Yeah, I'll
We'll
read
get
it.
it cleared up.
Um,
But we're, yes,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, I apologize if this paragraph wasn't consistent with the prior discussions. I wasn't aware of those. I think this paragraph stemmed from a prior lease. And so I just incorporated it here. But if the parties wish to, you know, we certainly could adjust it as needed between the county and the fair board if we want to say necessary repairs would be addressed or something like that as they arise, or, you know, we could come up with some language that could allow us to cross that bridge when we get there.
And so he doesn't resell itself, you know, there was some too many years ago that they were looking for a place for the people to go when it's a storm situation.
Yeah.
And the grandstand was the one that was suggested. So I mean, it went from being okay for a storm to all of a sudden.
I hit under there many times myself during the tornado. So, yeah,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
Mark Lander from the Fair Board. Mr. Ford, we approached Mr. Clement last year to ask him to revise his appraisal based on what we have done and separate it out into what has been done, what is absolutely needed, and what were just recommended applications. One example of an item that was in his proposal was installing LED lights in the grandstand. As we all know, the sun's out until, you know, almost the end of racing most of the season. So that, at that time, his proposal was a cost of at least $75,000 to put LED lights in the grandstand. That didn't seem to make a lot of sense to us. So we asked him if he would revise and see what was actually needed, not just everything that he
Sure.
had in it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
But he never got that proposal back to us last summer.
so Mr. Ford will reach out to him and we'll find out what has been done and what needs to be done. Okay. Anybody else?
One administrative item, the post office box has not been used for many years.
Glad you brought that up, because I took that from an old lease and I was going to inquire to see if that was, what is an appropriate address?
12519 at 58208. That one was on the 2005 lease, not on the 2016 lease. That one's handwritten with the other one, so.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I got a question.
Yep.
Aaron about the River City Speedway and the Fair Board. Any idea how many parking spots? What's the parking lots are?
85.
85. And then when we talk about the use of that Fair Board land or the build out of the facility. I mean, what was discussed, I don't know, 3 weeks ago with those folks was when we're in the season, just for conservation purposes, they'll probably not be on there, right? So it comes Friday and there's a race program, and they got a bunch of stuff over there, or they're in the way. And that's not gonna work very well, right? I think it was
I think,
bullet point 3 or whatever.
yeah, I
And
think,
they sort
I
of
think
talked about, we'll
construction
stay out of your way
engineers-
during the season, and then
Yeah.
if we could assume it and be able to use it, then that's great. And it just it references like the fair board, right? And it's typically just the need is typically for Friday nights, but, you know.
Except for the.
I don't wanna show up on a Friday night and we got 60 to 80 race teams and we gotta call out the superintendent and ask him to do a bunch of stuff. It doesn't work very well, so.
So, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. So, you know,
Needs clarification.
that was what I was gonna say was, I think I understand Mr. Evercole's question. The Fair Board has sublease agreements with River City Speedway. So the covenants that we've outlined in this document, do they extend to River City Speedway during racing events? And I've been talking with Icon and construction engineers, they've been pretty clear, they're gonna work around the speedways
Yeah.
schedules as well, but if it's in a lease and terms of the lease are not being met, I would hope you would call me or Ms. Wamstad and let us know so that we can address that. But they're construction engineers and Icon, they're pretty genuine when they say they're gonna work around.
Yeah.
Races, the fair. But so the question, back to the question.
So I'm gonna answer your question with a question to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. Is your issue with section 5, paragraph 3, the fact that it doesn't reference speedway events?
I mean, I read it as though because we lease from the fair board that it would, but
Yes,
I think it's important just to have that dialogue to make sure that all parties understand, right?
Yep.
I mean, I don't think there's much concern until it's Friday nights, right? Or Fridays, period, right? So,
so I wrote it with that intent in that the fair board leases to Speedway, so that would be a fair board sanctioned event. But I see your concern in that it's not referenced. We can include that in there and just say,
in
county fair by
any given year, we have about 25 events that are scheduled, so sometimes Mother Nature wipes, it, but, you know, it's for all intents and purposes. I mean, there has been a time or two that we've actually raced in April to the middle of September, so.
Sure.
And I mean, I think these organizations would do a good job of communicating to the superintendent who's in charge of building. You know, hey, races are starting May or whatever, you know. Because there's gonna be a point in time where they're just gonna need to remove that stuff, you know, so we can do our thing, right?
So would it provide you peace of mind if we added, will not disrupt the regularly scheduled activities of the fair board to include the speedway
Just
events?
sub-leases.
Do you want it written like that, to include,
Go-karts and the racetrack.
to include the events of any sublessees?
The fair board and sub-leases.
Sure. Mr. Commissioner Egan.
I assume you know weeks in advance of what all the events are gonna be, so if Icon and the construction engineers always have that calendar that they could get from Mr. Ford, they will know they have to be cleared out spaces at that time. I don't think that would be too impossible to
Right.
show them.
Something else, Commissioner Ingham, that I've offered and we'll stick to is we will have regular construction meetings. It'll be, you know, construction engineers, Icon, myself, but also including a fair board member and or a River City Speedway member to be included in those meetings and on those emails so that that communication continues to happen. on a week, at least on a weekly basis, so. Once we get moving forward and get those set up, I'll reach out to Ms. Jeannie then and see who the fair board wants attending those meetings.
Could you just add Darren and
Whoever you want.
Keith
Mhm.
to those meetings right now? I don't need
My
to.
Gmail's almost full, so I don't need any more emails.
Oh, I'll
but-
fill it up.
Yeah.
You bet. Done.
All right, is there any more questions to this lease agreement that we need to
Yes.
change or work on? Okay, go ahead.
You have proposed a 10-year lease and we asked for a 99-year lease. That is something that we need to discuss and to try and come into some sort of compromise for that. And then in section 1, number 5. The way I read this, that's basically tells me that the county has come in with a 30-day written notice for us to vacate, for the lease to be done. So basically, you're saying it's a 10-year lease, and then on here, it's basically a month-to-month lease.
It would still be a month-to-month lease with the option to terminate, or I
Well,
mean, it would still
30
be a 10-year lease with the option to terminate.
Bottom line, you could come in with a 30-day written notice and terminate. That's what this is.
That's
And
correct.
we don't want to agree with that.
The current lease from 2005, the original term for the bulk of the property was 29 years with an option written into the lease for an additional 50 years. That lease, the current part of that lease would then run through 2034. So this actually loses us a year on our current lease, doesn't include any written option to
Extend it.
extend it, and also has a 30-day termination clause.
And, you know, I can kind of do the best I can to kind of explain how we got where we're at. The term ultimately is up to the parties. I'm just the lawyer that writes it on paper. But in my discussions with some commissioners, the 10-year term was decided upon. Certainly subject to negotiation with your entity. But part of it was due to the interest of having one term for the whole and avoid where we are today, where we have several parcels with several different terms, and then we forget, as you were saying, that we have an expired lease and nobody really knows. You know, so I think, I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, but when we're looking at a longer term, then we might be more so looking at parceling it out because of the potential for an additional expansion. If we're looking at a 99-year lease, I'm no betting person, but I suspect we may need to add on to our correctional center at some point in the next 99 years. Because our consultants tell us what our addition is right now isn't gonna be enough.
I thought they told us at the last meeting that it wasn't gonna be done in our lifetimes, 20, 30 years down the road.
Well, there's no phase 3, and I said that at the last meeting, and I also was clear I would never make promises for future commissions. But what I did say was, there's no plan for phase 2, which is what you're referring to. And the other thing I said was, even if the county had the mills, which they don't, or other revenue, which we don't, to proceed with more building, the Sheriff's Law Enforcement Center would most likely take precedent. So what I said was, at least for the next 20 years, I don't see a building happening because the bond is for 20 years.
Lost it? This isn't a 30-day notice just on a whim. It's part of the, if there were breaches of the contract, then that's what this notice of termination is about, isn't it?
Yes. And I could clarify that further and make that clear in there. So I understand your concerns. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, one of our concerns with the length of the term is we're spending thousands of dollars in capital improvements ourselves. You guys are spending a lot of money on this addition. Every year, we spend a lot of money on improvements to the grounds. And to give us a 10-year term, for instance, one of our sublessees, the go-kart track is putting up a storage building on their property right now. They were very concerned about the length of the term. I told them right now, we have a lease through 2034. So they went ahead with it. But going forward, you know, if we're spending money building new bathrooms or doing a lot of different things, a 10-year lease, it doesn't make us feel real comfortable and eager to make those improvements.
So, okay, so the bonds are good for 20 years, right?
20-year bond, yes, sir.
So what if we put at 20 years?
20 years with no 30-day right of termination might work.
Well, with cause,
But that doesn't say that on here.
we can add it.
That might be a possibility.
25 would sound better.
I agree with Dennis.
Yes, you always want more.
No, I agree too. 25
You
is
know-
just a little bit better of a planning stage. I mean. if
It
we're-
does, but we want to go up to the bond cycle, I think.
But we'd like to continue our fair, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me?
But we'd like to continue our fair.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, like I said, we're looking at this from two different ways and trying to come to
Yep.
an agreement in the middle.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's people come up to us and would like to invest money. They want to know what we're doing, and one of the interests was in the 4-H area, where a building was proposed to us. A heated building year round. You talk 10-year, 20-year, or in some language, I'm a little off the subject, but we have sewer and water to our facility. We're gonna take it away and then re-gift it back to us and saying we're doing us a favor. That, we'll get to that later on that announcement. But more would be better. When we asked for 99, we knew we'd never get 99.
No.
But you went to the bottom.
Oh, what do you guys think? 25 years?
Well, I give tenants more than 10 years just in my commercial buildings. So, and this is a much bigger entity with much more community engagement and involvement, and it's very important to the community. I don't even, to be honest with you, I didn't see a problem with 99. So
I mean, I don't see why not 25. I mean, it's.
at a minimum, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
The other thing is, there's no reason to not make it a long-term, as long as you're running a fair. That's what you're doing. We want that fair to run. We want the speedway to be there, all of it. So if you quit, then the lease could terminate anyway at.
Right.
midpoint. So I have no problem with 25 years.
Mr. Chair,
when you put limits on it,
we're
that
estimating
limits
up with the bond.
our growth.
No. Okay, so agreeable to 25 years?
We'll have to think about.
Discussion.
I mean, this will all be reproposed, so.
We have a little bit more we'd like to discuss. Or we think 25 is a
Their direction.
better direction. right?
Better direction.
Good word. These deals are better than tonight.
Okay, we gotta get things straightened around with that main grandstand too, so.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
So we'll change that to 25 years
For now,
for now. Is that agreeable?
yeah. As long as they're cool with it, I'm fine.
Okay.
Okay, number 6 under the lease agreement. I think that the North Dakota Century Code Chapter 402 is repealed.
Okay, hold it for my police staff to take a look.
I think that's gone.
Oh, yes, it has been. They changed, I believe it was in 2015, they redid all of the century code referring to fairs.
Thank you for that. I'll get that updated.
Number 7. Would like, the Fair Board would like to propose that at the termination of the lease, that we could take the buildings off where the county would pay fair market value of the buildings at the completion of the lease.
How the board thinks on that proposal. This was something I can't recall if I took it from a prior lease, but this paragraph would be consistent with the law as it stands for lease property, is that fixed assets remain with the property owner, and personal property, meaning those removable, would continue ownership of the lessee. But we certainly can agree to otherwise if that's the wish of both entities.
No, I agree with that. Real estate is the ground and the buildings that are affixed to it. A grain bin can be a fixture, or sometimes the way they're built, they can be movable personal property. So I don't think it's a realistic issue. Any county commission is going to shut down the fair. So we might be talking 50 years from now when the fair would stop. So I don't, you guys will have to decide if that's an important issue for you. I don't see that as a long-term issue. Okay.
Number 8 talks about Fair Board carrying liability insurance during the term of the lease, protecting Fair Board and county. Everybody can read that. Anyways, we can't buy liability insurance, which covers acts that are not our fault. Like if a lightning strike hits a tree and it hits the sheriff's car, that's not our fault. We can't get insurance for that.
But you're not liable for negligence in that case either.
Correct.
Typically, it would just be having the county listed as an additional insured under here.
So we'd like the indemnification should be limited to your negligence or or omission.
Is that what you're saying, I guess? Indemnification should be linked to your negligence or negligent omission.
Omission.
Is that
Yeah,
an act of God, lightning strike or whatever?
essentially, you would agree to indemnify the county if your entity acted in a negligent way that caused damage to the county. So if you're more comfortable, if I add by the Fair Board's negligence or omission, we certainly could.
Yeah, we should probably have something
There's
there.
inherent in the paragraph that you referred to.
Yep.
Okay, section 2, the license agreement, and you did tell us your interpretation of that, be a license agreement versus a lease agreement. The intent to jointly use the property, that's the difference of it, right? Between an actual lease and a license.
Generally, there's a lot of other distinctions, but yes.
Okay. There's no mention of a term on here for the license term.
Correct, and that is one distinction of a license versus lease. Leases can be by law for a period of time. A license agreement cannot. You're essentially being granted permission to utilize the property. If it were for a term, it would be considered a lease agreement.
Okay, so if we granted, or if the county grants us a license for that property, that's forever?
Until terminated, yes.
And the terminated could be,
Yeah, what are the terms of a termination?
So when we're looking at license agreements, that's why in this section, paragraph 4 is included, is that the owner in a license agreement always has to retain absolute control And it cannot be for a term like a lease is. So when an entity grants a license, it's for an undetermined term that can be terminated under the absolute discretion of the property owner. That's why we have paragraph 4, because that's what a license requires.
So how do you terminate? Say, I want to terminate this license agreement, and then it's done. Okay,
How does that protect us?
that does not protect us. Okay. Exhibit A, under still this section 1 or section 2, your description there. On exhibit A, it excludes what we call the go-kart road.
Exhibit C.
A.
So the legal description for the license agreement, is that what you're referencing?
Well, it's under license agreement, that's the description right there. If you look at that exhibit A, it does not include that road. Who,
I'm not sure what road you.
the go-kart road, the one that comes out, we call it the South entrance off of
I know what you're looking
Yeah.
at, so I'm understanding correctly.
It's the road that's going to be rebuilt.
So, yeah, that's the one we're gonna build
Yeah,
up.
so the jail's right here.
Mhm.
This we call the go-kart road.
That's not the road that's gonna be rebuilt. The road that's gonna be rebuilt is north of the correctional facility. The one she's referencing is south of the facility.
The one that we're talking about rebuilding with crushed concrete and the same.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
that's the other one that the highway will build up.
And this is the north
Yeah.
entrance up here. Is that going to be
So you're saying-
maintained by the counties? Yeah, the one that.
You're
goes
looking at
yeah.
exhibit C here.
Well, this is big. Whatever.
That's not the legal description for the go-kart track. The legal description for the go-kart track is exhibit C. This is what the surveyor completed.
That's the road. It goes there and it goes all the way here and then it goes up here.
See,
Right, so the lot lines should be on the other side. The road should be included here if you were to go with that lot line.
but this is a jointly used roadway, right?
Mhm.
So then we'd want to do a license agreement for that roadway,
So
since it's joint property, which we could do.
for that,
Yeah, and then the maintenance. Also, where it's at.
is that the road you're saying will be crushed?
Concrete and gravel.
The old pit road.
Yep.
South, right? That's what you
The
call
south
pit
road,
road.
yeah. Oh, not pit road, it's the go-kart road.
Oh, okay. I'm so, my apologies.
What kind of puts that road into a 25-year lease and maintenance? Whatever we can take care of.
It would be my recommendation to include it as part of the license agreement, since it's, my understanding is a jointly used road, correct?
So it go in section 2, but
Yeah.
that does need clarification. And then number 5, again, you're referencing that country code that's the field. And into the construction, we said that section 3. That's the construction easement you want on our land that the Fair Board currently owns. And that we're going to need to discuss further. among the fair boards, but at this point, I don't think we are. I don't know if we can come to a conclusion to,
We talk with the rest of
Yeah.
the board, but, you know,
that's giving up our land.
So on
You guys
the
were-
construction easement, if we
It's not
can't build
Well,
up,
there's
no,
a
Temporary.
construction and there's a
we
permanent.
can't build up or pave the road without it. So you get, it's mutually beneficial there. If we can't come to terms on the construction easement, what's gonna happen is we're gonna, and I've asked construction engineers to look into rerouting the utilities. And so if we have to reroute the utilities, you're gonna lose sewage to the grandstands
for how long?
until you come up with a solution.
Well, that's the best road out there. It's done properly by you folks when they had the first jail made. When they want to move utilities, they could bore underneath that. I talked to that, foreman. And if we can rip the whole road out, then it'll be a benefit by being paved. That's how we lose our pervious ground out there, by adding more pavement. We want that green and we want that road back to gravel the way it is.
So you don't want a paved road? You don't want the current gravel road to be paved?
No. Pave that other road, the go-kart road, that's the one that's in tough shape. This road's the best road out there. We discussed that. I brought it up. They could line bore underneath that.
We need an easement for that.
No,
To go
From
under
us.
the roadway,
from us, you can, no.
It's just gonna touch your property. We do.
the roadway goes.
Underneath, yeah, but a utility
That's the
easement is
other way.
different.
Who wants a piece of property with easements on it? You know, that's the first thing you always say.
The roadway crosses onto Fairboard property, so if we were to put the utilities under the roadway, we would need an easement for those utilities.
That's understandable.
Just depends on where they come in from.
And that's easily done. Trust me, I was mechanical foreman on jobs before in the plumbing line.
That's what this easement would allow for.
So they described it like rip the road out from the east to west. You're just going under it. That's done. Without any disturbance, you know, to retie it. Are you enlarging it? Or repositioning it in a different area, or what's I haven't seen a ground, map or, wrong words.
There are the blueprints, we've shared them all of them that we have.
Sewer and water.
So as far as, are you asking about widening the road or the sewage? When you ask about widening,
Why can't you hook onto the existing sewer? Why?
Because it currently runs under I'm certainly no engineer or construction person, but from my conversations to understand, to put this in writing, is that where the utilities currently are would be under what would be the building.
The new building they're putting up from?
Yeah, so that's why they need to be rerouted.
You have to run under every building to get it out.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what they're trying to sell on this.
So
They routed
is
the
this-
sewer of the main hospital here.
So is Exhibit F, does that show all the existing water, sewer, electrical on the property that's going to be Exhibit F?
So. That includes the existing.
I'll have to check on that.
Is that, yeah, it's really hard to read, so if we could make it bigger for old guys,
Sure.
would be good.
So you're looking for that?
Yeah, that's it. I'm just wondering if that shows everything that's listed. That they're proposed to remove or replace or relocate or.
Beautiful road. I just don't see the pavement is using up a lot of money on this project. They want to pave it. I mean, we're very
Maybe it
pleased.
would also disrupt the use of it, obviously.
when did the concept of paving it surface? Was it through the construction folks or what?
It was a couple meetings ago.
Just to have a better road.
Yeah. You get a better room to the parking lot,
You don't want that.
all the way down the
You
parking
don't
lot.
want to pave. All right.
Well, we're trying to keep it green. And that's why they've been having to put these ponds in. Which I guess are, did you get the other pond removed from the other corner of the jail then? And put a-
You're talking about all the way up north.
Mark was working on that one.
No, so we met with the city
Yeah.
on Monday to talk about, because obviously we've changed our plans. Originally, it was gonna involve lot 2. We find out the Fair Board owns lot 2. We can't go that route. So before we got too far down the road, myself and construction engineers and Icon, we met with city planning just to make sure if we change plans, it's not holding anything up. No, we have to have a retainage pond. That's federal requirement. So it would be, but it was originally gonna be lot 2. That's not where it's gonna be. The retainage pond is gonna be in that grassy area behind the correctional facility.
Southwest corner of the jail.
So, you know, the city planning office was pretty clear on that. No, I believe we were just paving was just to offer for you guys to have a paved road, but I could,
One of the benefit of this, we did the other road, tremendous. And it would still come into your area.
Tom, would abstaining from paving that road that they're not interested in getting paved, would that offset the addition of storm check chambers rather than a pond that would take up all that additional parking?
sir, that's a good question. I'll follow up with.
Now they're a little more money, but if we're not gonna drop all that concrete, a little money just got freed up.
To go underground.
Those holding chambers, I think they're called storm check chambers.
That's gonna be my next statement would be if we end up with a pond out there,
It's just gonna be a mosquito breeding factory.
that would be number 1, but number 2 was parents lose track of their children. We always have a lost child out there. It would have to be fenced very high all the way around.
Yeah.
We would really be opposed to
Yeah, I
a pond.
totally agree with that. I got kids to be happy about that.
Lost child everywhere. Not for long, but we do our best.
We found them all so far.
Last year it wasn't truly lost.
Would
She was
really be
13
nice
and
if
trying
we
to
figure out a way to
disappear.
I would say, but, use the money else.
Can we get a bigger picture of that app?
Yeah, for sure.
Or can we get something that shows all the utilities that are going to be messed with out there?
Yeah, I wrote down map of existing utilities, so I'll reach out to Icon, see if we can get more detail. I can appreciate the eyes thing, by the way.
Yeah. Glasses, it doesn't work.
Blowing up on my phone, I'm gonna get blurry.
I know on phone, but I'm not using my phone.
I know, but it still got blurry and I can only then
Yeah.
see this much of it, so, yeah.
Okay, so what do you want?
Well, on our property, you mentioned putting gravel in there. And you'd like to keep it green, so I mean, if you wanted to use gravel, like it's back to green.
No, are you referring to the lot 2 again, sir?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they're not,
they won't stage in there at all anymore. then?
no, for our last meeting, you were not amenable to that, so they're not gonna stage on lot 2. That was my discussion anyway, with construction engineers. Well, I'll clarify.
Mhm.
I'll clarify with
Sure.
them.
Just a couple more things in section 6, number 1. We're supposed to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the county. All that's listed under here, and the Fair Board would pose that the county do the same for us.
So this provision is included as a standard provision in a lease agreement. So as the lessee, we typically indemnify the lessor. As a political subdivision by law, the county is not permitted to indemnify any other entity. We can agree to be responsible for our own negligence or reckless behavior, which we could write in there if that would.
I think we should reword that, and if it's not gonna be reciprocated between ourselves, then we have to just take it out.
Political subdivisions cannot indemnify. We run into this with the Air Force and the Grand Sky leases as well. It just legally cannot.
The fair board's the operator of all this. The county is not, so the county, unless the county is negligent, destroys something somehow or other, there would be no reason for the county to be involved. The operator of the lessee, he's saying, that's really always the way it is. And you're only liable if you're negligent or you allow something to happen. It's not just a strict liability thing at all.
I think that we should try and reword this.
To indicate that the county is responsible for their own negligence, is that?
That might be something that we're gonna have to take back to the board and get a clarification for us, what we're looking for. And then I promise I only have 2 more things. Section 10, the last sentence. What does this mean? Excess real estate and special assessments assessed against said property shall be apportioned between the county and fair board on the basis of the area utilized by each entity.
So this was a provision that was taken from the prior agreement, and I initially wondered the same as you. What is this thing?
It kind of sounds like we're supposed to be paying property taxes.
That was exactly my impression,
Yeah.
and I actually asked our auditor, are they paying property taxes?
Yeah.
Because I was wondering about that and got the same answer. In looking at this further, and maybe some of you were around then, it sounds like from what I can put together, there were some special assessments that were assessed against the property.
Yes,
perhaps
in the
after
last
the
week.
flood.
Yep.
And,
who paid up this?
and so that's what this was, that's how this arose, is that, I believe the agreement between the county and the fair board obviously predated me. I don't know, I was maybe in high school yet. But my understanding was it was to address those special assessments that came in.
Okay.
So in trying to be consistent with prior agreements, I included that same language to be consistent. Hopefully there are no special assessments that come up in the next 25 years. But if there were, the intent was to treat them the same as they had been historically.
So say that something gets assessed on one lot of the property and not on another lot for some strange reason, and we have a lease on this lot, we have to pay the specials.
I think it says that it's a portion between the two entities on the basis of the area
I know
utilized.
the jail would, have their own specials, we wouldn't want to pay those. But if there's something way over on the west side that needs to have specials on it for some reason, then we have to pay that.
It would be consistent with how it was handled previously.
We just
Same
assume
language.
those specials when we get the renegotiation of that lease.
On a prior lease, I'm not following exactly.
Isn't that correct, Mark?
That was, actually, that last lease was done about the time that they were applying the specials. And it was to separate, so that the county paid the specials for the portion that was used for the jail and for the county shop. And we paid the specials, the flood specials, on the other property that we were using.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the agreement.
I mean, I included it to kind of be consistent with prior leases that existed. I think it's fair to say, to the best of both entities' knowledge, there aren't specials that are coming, knock on wood. So if we wish to just exclude that entirely, if that provides some peace of mind, and we can certainly address it if there are specials that arise in that time period, you know, I would have no objection to that. I don't know the board's position on that.
Sandwiched between like state, federal roads, so I don't know what the special assessments would even be for unless they put up streetlights or something. Even then, I'm guessing that'd be federal and state funded, so.
Columbia Road would be a city street, wouldn't
Columbia,
it?
that's correct.
That runs along the west side.
So if they,
Correct.
if no, if they, yeah, maybe we should probably get rid of that. And then my last, the next paragraph references that Century Code, that's not again. And I'm done.
I got a couple. So. June 2nd, we're gonna have a World Wildlife event. So there'll be drones up there. And we can share all that based on how we use the space. We're still losing space, so how do we operate with events? Once that jail's in there, I mean, we're clearly losing some space. And if the event goes off without Mother Nature, doesn't allow it, we'll have that footage so you guys can see that. Some of you have been out there, kind of made the tour, which is great. So you'll visually see how that space is used. So I know there was a trunk up front that was looked at, but where are we at with that?
We'll have to ask Commissioner Rusted, he's working on that.
So I sent out an email to everyone at this table earlier when you guys were going over part of the lease that I already committed to memory. And so the real estate agent came back with a price that was significantly different than what we had originally thought. And that I think might have been, well, I can't speak for everybody else, but it certainly I felt reasonable. It's up about 20-25%. Hate to do math on the fly, so I'm just going to estimate like that. But apparently, after speaking with Jeff, the listing agent, yesterday, the seller's motivated and willing to entertain other offers. And so that was the genesis of what I sent to the other my counterparts. That we need to just decide what we believe to be something that we can all wrap our arms around, if in fact we have a majority that agrees to that purchase to proceed. So that's kind of where we're at with that. It's new to me as of almost exactly 24 hours ago.
I know someone referenced earlier that Nick West is he gonna move culverts, or we just can use because we've used the county shop, right? I mean, it's clear that we have to use the county
Oh,
shop.
yeah, okay.
So in and
So the
around,
culverts that are there, I think are gonna be there, but he won't be getting any more because Gowan Construction is gonna be doing all the culvert work for the county of Grand Forks. So, I think what's there will be there, but as they disappear, they will not, there won't be any more coming in, so. And I don't know how much culvert work he's got going right now, so.
so, I mean, based on there not being that many culverts there previously that I ever remember, I suppose that useful space will be limited then. Would you agree with
Well,
that?
you're gonna have a lot of space there.
Tough space for cars to park in this construction.
Oh, that would be an idea to to add to the lease the use of the county shop? Because I know Nick has said once these culverts are gone, they're gone, right?
Mhm.
I mean, and if that was out, that would be very helpful, right? If, you know, that spot up front isn't a possibility. Back to the easement for the mosquito trap. It's not a new development, right? So why can't there be an easement that we don't need that? I mean, are there mosquito traps downtown here with all the buildings going on?
I haven't gotten an answer on that I've appreciated yet. When I brought up the Arbor Park development and how that took green space away, I was responded to with them saying that, well, there was a building there at one time prior to it being a park. Yeah, that didn't pass the smell test really, but apparently that's the logic that was used to give them the luxury of not having to build a pool. And apparently, since there was never a building where the jail's expanding to, won't have that luxury, apparently.
Well, I think at one time there probably was a building out there, the old fairground. If they're gonna use that logic.
I don't know.
Actually, there were a lot of buildings out on the fairgrounds. There were 15 barns, I think, and the roller skating rink.
Roller skating, yeah.
There were a lot.
I'm shaking a lot of trees on this one, and I'm not really getting really anywhere. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying I'm done, but I'd be feeling you full of, well, you know what, if I told you I was getting any momentum.
So if that's not the case, there won't be a different rendering. It is what it is. Because I thought I heard that potentially there might be different.
Well, we thought there was gonna be, you know, we're still working on that lot for your parking.
Yeah.
And that's not gonna go away. So,
Thank you.
Mark's working diligently on that, so we'll get a lot of cars in there.
So in the event there wasn't a new rendering. Crazy. But whatever.
There's multiple. Look at the package.
Grassy areas around the current jail then, if somehow the mosquito trap doesn't get built, can we use the grassy areas?
No, I
Close to the.
We gotta ask that.
That's
don't know how close to the jail they can go.
It's a policy decision on your part. So I guess, you know, the federal requirement for the retainage pond, that's clear. As far as the easement didn't have anything to do, unless I'm misunderstanding, the easement has nothing to do with the retainage pond. Back to the utility rendering, I'll get that. But other than that,
It seems to me our best bet on restoring that area where the pond would be to try and divert funds from what would have been a concrete road to the potential storm tech chambers under the ground. That seems to me like that would be plan A right now because, or B rather, because plan A of getting the, what's that?
Sorry.
Just not having to do it isn't seeming to be going our way. That is a significant amount of space.
So I think they're referring to the grassy area adjacent to the correctional facility that has no trespassing signs.
Yeah.
And that's because we have people, members of the public that go up to the jail and cause problems. They cause trouble, vandalism, damage, try to communicate with the inmates. I don't know if that's a DOCR requirement. That's a Mr. Burkholder question.
Yeah.
But it's really, that's.
Brent, are you
board's
on?
Purview.
I don't think he is, no.
Yeah, he is, BB.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Brent Burkholder, are you on?
Okay, coffee break or something.
Yeah.
He's invisible.
Mr. Commissioner, I have a question. In our previous leases, we had been granted access to use that grassy area and the ring road that goes around the jail. But we had never been given that opportunity to use it. They put up the no trespassing signs. and said absolutely no parking on the, yeah, dug the ditch and said no parking on the grass.
Do you recall which lease?
I think it was, I don't have it with me, the land, or maybe the land use agreement, 2005. It could be, I have it at home.
Let's see if I can pull it up here. Okay, you know, it's the board's decision as to what they wish to do. From a prosecutor's perspective, to have members of the public close to the correctional facility is very concerning. I recall within the last year, maybe Mr. Burkholder addressing the board about individuals trying to communicate with inmates. That certainly affects the integrity of our criminal prosecution if that communication were to occur. Ultimately, the decision is the Board of Commissioners, but I think that's a concern that's been raised in the past for the safety of the facility and the safety of the public. But ultimately, it's.
I can see parking.
And would there be an ability to fence some of it to keep people away from the building?
I think that was a discussion point previously, is whether or not a fence should be around the facility.
It's a lot of area that we lost for parking and even if we did have that new part of the county shop, which would be called the south end, that wouldn't be as much as we did lose in the original footprint of the 14 acres. So that's why we were forced to buy the 3 acres, because we just really had to start thinking out of the box. And what are we gonna do? Hard to have an event and no place to park your car. And that's why we're gonna have drones up to show you really what's going on. Wish we had some of that now. That's a big deal, the parking.
No.
No, we need to add.
Nice to clear out this culverts sooner than later, and I know that's not easily done because it.
I don't know that you'll move the culverts just for your fair and for the law loss.
Or where would they go?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Colin's got, he's gonna have the contract for the county, you know, so.
So just so I make sure I'm understanding, in the event we need to memorialize this in the document, I want to make sure I'm understanding what area we're talking about here. Let me pull up.
Milky wants to score them all out.
Are you referring?
Alan wants to score them all. He's got a lot of.
That-
Area
and
right
then-
here?
Yes.
You believe a prior lease agreement provided you access to.
We-
During
right
the fair week, yep, you could park on the grass and we could use the ring road, which we call the ring road, comes off the south of North Water in front of the go-kart track and then heads north to their parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If you can find the lease where that's referenced,
Okay.
I would be interested.
Start date. There's no start date yet,
For what?
the project. Would that be useful for us to show you guys the drone footage? In the event we're able to run? I mean,
Well, you won't be affected for your World of Outlaw show on June 5th, because nothing's gonna be done before then.
I think it would
You're
be,
gonna have everything you had before.
it'll be useful just for you guys to see it, right? Because some of you went on the tour in the go-karts, right? So from above, you'll see the surrounding area too, my guess, unless weather is such that it's
I mean, I've been there.
gloomy.
It's pretty significant, the parking. And I mean, like I
mean, that's
said
why-
before, my 12-year-old was the first person to bring it up to me, like where are people gonna park during World of Outlaws? So
Mhm.
we need to figure something out to make this feasible.
Nice.
So they won't lose anything by June 5th. They'll have
Right, right.
everything they had before.
No, I agree. I'm gonna visit with Nick too to see about the culverts, to see about that space and how quick it, or if it could be used at all. So.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
could I make just a suggestion? I know that this may not go through, but other communities that deal with parking space issues for venues, oftentimes what they do, they get in touch with the city, and public transit will pick up people at various locations and drop them off at the venue, usually for free. And so I realize that as venues continue to grow and more people want to come to them, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have parking for everybody who wants to come. It may be a good idea to investigate further venues or investigate further options like using public transit and seeing if the city's area transit will pick up at various parking locations and take people to the venues such as the fair, such as the World of Outlaws, so that they don't have to worry about where they're going to park. They can come to a parking lot. We do it in Thief River Falls all the time. When the fair is going on for Pennington County, we pick up in 4 different locations across the city in parking lots, and then we bring them to the fairgrounds because they don't have a way to expand to have more parking. So it may be an idea, not that it may come to fruition this year, but it may be an idea to look at in the future, so that it's not always where is everybody going to park. We don't necessarily need to all park right at the county fairgrounds. It may make more sense to park in other venues and then get transported to that venue. They do it with hockey all the time.
I will let you know that we did try that one year. We contracted with Ralph Engelstad Arena to use their parking space, and we actually paid for buses just on the weekend, I believe it was. And we had very few people that took advantage of it. They would rather come and park any place close rather than do that. But we did try that one time, and it's certainly worth looking at again, especially if they consider someone would do the
Right. And it's just an option. I mean, not that some people do want to park in an exterior location, but at least it's an option so that if we do have people that feel they need to be closer or want to be closer, we only have so much land to spread out on. And I think it's at least something, an option worth investigating.
Oh, it's a Friday. I know that.
The Outlaw event coming up, is that?
Next Friday.
Second.
I knew it couldn't be fair.
Yeah.
So how close to, with the fact that there's no construction yet, how close to last year are you? How many spots are you short right now for the Outlaws on the June 2nd? Any idea? Or talking about just future?
What's that?
There's
No, there's no equipment.
nothing staged right now, so we
Just big event,
Yeah,
and then nothing going on up there yet.
correct.
So when is it gonna start being a real crunch?
Mess.
next Friday.
Huh?
When the Outlaws are here.
Well, you know,
Move some of our.
When
Yeah.
the construction people fence off their area that they're gonna build on, which is that one piece that you refer to it as. I mean, and that's, the project's gonna go through, so that's, when that fence goes up, so those guys have a fence around their build out area. Is whenever that goes in is when, if we're approaching a big event, that'll be the head scratcher. What do we do?
And the first major event will be the fair in 4 weeks,
Yeah,
depending on when it gets
and
started.
we don't know where the fence is going to be, so.
And that's,
Surprise.
excuse me, Mr. Chair, that would be your big question too. That's housing on the north end for the carnival. When they come in, they unhook the rides and go up 81, the pit road that goes into the pit entrance, the south side of the pits, all the way up on our property. It takes that whole area to put their campers, their holding tanks, their showers, all that up in that area. Take 1550 square feet up there to do it. That mapped it out up there. And the ones that come up the commissioners that took the tour, I actually showed them where that would start. So it'd be, where would he put them?
That won't be blocked off. You're talking about the north lot, the lot two, coming off the north.
But even going
No,
into
south
pit,
of that road.
even south, the pits going, pit gate,
Mhm.
pit gate right in here.
How far south of the pit road is the
Here's
Kearney
the,
Village go?
it starts here,
Oh,
goes
I see.
all the way over, it goes around to that highway, it comes all the way up
Got it.
Valley Home, all the way back.
If you could get them on that Fairboard line, that'd be great. You can't
There's
get
too
'em.
many of them just with terrible.
Can you remind me, it's like that entire grassy area, right? You had said that they utilized for their village. Correct?
And some on the south side of the pit road also.
Before we're done with all that on that north end of our commercial building, then, our exhibit building, there would be a fence going.
Yeah.
Up, east and west. And we almost have, we need a little bit more room there where that lot line is now. There's some stakes driven, right? For example, we have about 12 feet of concrete going out there for the overhead door. People that work the fair, we have to have their trailers in there to live in.
I think they were gonna move that fence so that it wouldn't interfere.
They're
with
gonna
that.
move it back.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be just.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
They were gonna-
helpful.
They were gonna do that.
Okay,
We're thinking like 100 feet if we could get it, instead of 12 people from there, or it might work, it would.
Looked like it was gonna be quite a bit of room there moving that fence north.
That would help tremendous.
Hey, Brad?
I don't know what Brad's saying with River City Speedway, but when we talk about acquiring this land, it's already used. We talk about the county shed, already used. So we're going nowhere. I mean, we're talking about like, buy this, give you that, we already use it. You're taking everything away and well, in 2 years, we'll maybe give you 85 people. The way you guys are talking, this jail is gonna be full of people parking in there because it's gonna be full. We're losing 400 spots out there, at least. They got 2 weeks to redesign a fair. Redesign. That was their entrance to the Grand Forks Fair.
I don't think you're gonna see anything before the Grand Forks Fair is done.
Is Mr. Lando, when's the fair?
June 21st through the 25th.
So even if the commission and the fair board came to an executed lease license next week, and it's gonna take probably 2 weeks for city planning to review everything again, then it's gotta go to planning and zoning, then it's gotta go to council. You won't be getting cut off by the fair. I can't see that with the timeline. Just trying to visualize anything else. But I don't know, your access won't be cut off by the fair, by fair time. And even if the stars aligned, we've got going that fast, construction engineers has already said they're not gonna interfere with the fair during its operations, so.
that's this year. What about, it's still gonna be a 2-year deal?
Yes, ma'am.
So it'll still affect us for the next 2 years.
If it's in this agreement that we all agreed to, they can't.
Where are you gonna stage your material? I mean, somehow you're gonna have to use more ground too.
They're gonna have to stage, I've talked about that, I just haven't let Mr. Burkholder know yet, but we're gonna have to utilize some of the parking lot.
The existing parking lot.
On the existing.
And then after,
Space?
I think after the racing season's over into September, then they were gonna utilize your lot 2 for the winter. And then
Up until season starts again.
those seasons.
Could be a month earlier or a month later, right? I mean, depends on winter.
So,
Well, we want to grow out there. Everybody likes to think big.
Yeah.
Get people to donate money. They want to know that we have something. We can't come up to them and say, well, we got 10 more years. Nah,
Yeah,
we-
then-
we gotta, you know, so that's one of the big
well, we've
reasons.
already said 25.
Yeah, maybe I spoke way too soon. You know? So, consider that, you know, 30 or 40, and it's still open to more.
And when all this construction stuff is done,
Yes,
you'll have nice road, we'll be back all to the normal. If we can pick up that lot that he's working on Gateway Drive, you'll get 200 cars in there.
I bet Nick West would like the other lot.
Huh?
I bet Nick West would like that other lot too. That's been suggested. Gives him more space, right?
But that's what I'm saying, Bob,
Creates
is
that growth option.
if you want to pick up that land, there's already 200 cars there and it's not your land.
and they park on there anyway. It's okay.
I mean, so we're gaining nothing.
We're parking up, yeah, people park wherever they want to. Well, anyway, moving on, if we have a longer lease, we have some footing to go out and ask the public for, you know, what, you're willing some money for Grand Forks Fair.
We already said 25 years.
Nothing or anything we're asking for. So.
Yeah. So I think you guys can go back and figure out what you want to do. We would probably like an answer sooner than later as to this lease agreement. I think we can set another meeting. I don't know, 2 weeks now, somewhere between World of Outlaws and the fair, you know, and we can sit down and talk about this lease agreement. You guys can put in your issues, convey that information to Haley Wamstead. Then we can move on.
You know, the one thing I'd also add is, you know, if there are additional legal questions or, you know, I can't make decisions on behalf of the board. I'm just the one that puts pen to paper. But if you have legal questions for me, the language or otherwise, you know, feel free to reach out to me via email, stop into our office, give me a call, whatever. Yeah.
Well, that'll give you a couple of weeks to put a little push on that, getting rid of that pond, if we really need to see that out there. Definitely have a drawing.
Yeah, even fences, kids like climbing fences almost as much as they do like going into ponds. So
You know, there should be fences around every holding pond in Grand Forks.
Yes,
There should be.
Yeah, I would.
And they don't do anything with it. Some kid is gonna drown in there.
You know, we're holding a public event next to it.
Where the smallest children are closest to it.
There's housing developments around these ponds.
It's great.
Yeah, one was built right down the street from my old house. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
That's why keeping extra green in there, I think they should buy into that, it's just running the culvert in there.
I think the storm tech chambers.
So
Try for that.
when are you guys as a board gonna meet again so we can talk about this?
I would say we'd have to meet next week.
So-
Next Wednesday.
Okay, so soon after that, you'll get back to us and we can set up another.
We'll have,
And whatever changes you would like, if you could convey that information to Haley Wamstead, that would be great.
And also, based on the updates that we discussed today, I can update this and send it out to you guys so that you can have a substantive discussion on the updates when you meet next week as well.
We appreciate it.
Do you want to set another meeting?
Pardon?
Do we want to
I
set
have it
another
now.
meeting?
Yeah, we're gonna have another meeting, but it depends on when they get done with theirs. Unless you wanna have the joint meeting together. You guys wanna talk about it.
We will, yeah, we'll talk about it
So-
separately,
Yeah,
privately, but I'm thinking in, if we want to meet again in like 2 weeks, I'll review it again.
You're gonna meet what in next week?
Yeah, well,
We meet in 2 weeks then here?
Like on the 7th.
All right.
You guys want me to skip that one? Use or?
No,
Vote anyway, so.
I don't get to vote either, Mark.
If you could just write your names on the
Don't forget, I will not.
Yeah,
I know, and Mark won't be at that one.
Thank you.
I got so much fair stuff that I gotta get going to.
It should be
Oh,
available
thank
on my phone, but
Okay.
I'll be in Washford all day that.
So this guy, Mr. Bennett.
So what would be a good day for you guys, a couple of weeks down the road?
Let's start, what has been.
June 7th, is that good for us?
That's a really.
Maybe we could just add them
On
to
the
the
6th is
agenda,
commission.
on a regular commission meeting if they decide those decisions are agreeable and there's only maybe one or two little things to iron out. Maybe there's, have to be a full separate one.
At the end of the county commission
Maybe we
meeting, or
just put the fair board on the agenda. I mean, unless.
That would be the idea.
Six is the next meeting.
okay, June 6th is our next county commission meeting. And that starts at 4, but we're usually done by 5:30 or 6, depending how much is on the agenda. So should we have this meeting right afterwards?
Before.
Huh?
I think we're gonna have an administrative services meeting before.
You want to have it before?
Well, I believe that's what
Well-
Michelle is going to be asking for.
Like what, 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah,
I think she
Can
was
you do
doing.
it 2 o'clock in the
No,
afternoon?
no, sorry. We should have it after our regular meeting because we're going to have an administrative services meeting before. So it'd be admin services, regular scheduled meeting, and then joint.
Okay.
Fair board.
Do we have an admin service?
Do we have it?
I don't know.
Based off my conversation yesterday with Michelle, she's going to try and schedule one unless Debbie cannot get the information to her by in time. So.
Okay, okay. After the county commission meeting then,
I mean,
that'll be a long day.
yeah, unless you want to switch it to the 7th, I'm either way is fine.
Be nice, we didn't stretch things out so much. You don't know what would come up at the county commission meeting either.
Right. That's pushing 5 or 6 hours in a meeting.
Okay, you guys were good for the 7th, right? You're not good though for the 7th.
I don't know yet.
Okay,
We are trying to do weekly meetings for our fair on
because the fair
Wednesdays
is-
also though.
Yeah.
what's that?
I think we, starting in June, now we're trying to do weekly meetings so we can plan and prepare for the fair too, so.
Mr. Chair, why don't we just add them as an agenda item on our regularly scheduled meeting? And then if it seems like it's a lengthy discussion, we could look at a special meeting.
Okay. All right. 4 o'clock then on commissioner meeting day.
June 6th.
Take it from there.
Yeah, we'll do it from there.
Well, Mr. Chair, what time would you like us to show up? We don't need. to-
Well, our meeting starts at 4 and it depends on, we'll maybe have it toward the end of the agenda maybe? Or do you want to have it earlier?
Well, let's have it early so we can give them a time. So they don't just kind of guess.
Oh, I know,
We
there's
could
so
be
they don't
right at
sit
the
here for an
beginning.
hour.
I mean,
Yeah, so if we tell them 4, then 4.
then by 4:15, we're talking about it.
Yeah, how about 4:50? Yeah, 4 o'clock our meeting starts. You guys will try and have you around 4:15, okay?
Okay.
And then
Tuesday.
if you guys end up meeting
Sick.
next Wednesday for
The 6th.
your individual board,
It's a
I can
The
get the
6th.
updated version to you before your meeting, and then if after that meeting, if you guys have any additional changes, if you wanna just let me know. And then I'll try to make them so that everyone can get the update to the update before our next meeting as well.
That's one.
That's the 6th of June, right?
Yeah.
6th of June,
Regular commission.
regular commission.
Yeah, theirs is Tuesday, the 6th, yeah. Because we'll be meeting.
Here at 4 o'clock and then put us on our agenda at 4:15.
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming.
Meeting.
Adjourned.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming, you guys.